Before you stab me, I would like to at least state my case
Let me make my opening statements.
before I'm publicly executed. I would like to speak my mind. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Fix Stories. I am 1/3 of your host. I am Jared.
I'm another third. I'm Jaylon.
And I'm Charles. Hello, hello, hello.
And today we are doing things a little bit differently. Today we are going to, I'm going to be playing the role of author. I'm going to let these guys tear up my work. I feel like I'm far more sensitive than many of the other guests that we've had, but I am good at taking criticism, I think, and we'll see how it all goes. We are going to roll out a different style than we normally do, because normally, as you guys know, we read it ahead of time, and then we talk to the author about what we thought. But we're starting to change things a little bit in the sense that although we still read it ahead of time, we are going to put the document on screen and talk about what works, what doesn't work, and so on and so forth, so that you, the viewer or listener, can see exactly what we're talking about. Today we're working on a very specific story, but I will let Jaylon take over from here and do the hosting thing. So, Jaylon, it's your turn.
I will do my absolute darndest, but it's not gonna be pretty. So yeah, this is a very special piece. It's called Gods on Tinder, and this was especially fun for me to look back on because this is one of the first pieces that I ever edited for Jared when we first started working together about 3 years ago now. So it was really fun to look back and see both how Jared has grown with all of his other writing projects, but yet the essence is still the same, and also how my editing style has been allowed to evolve since starting to work with Oba instead of just freelance editing. So it was really cool. It was cool to see Charles's input on this. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into it today. We'll start out with Jared, share with us the heart behind this piece. Why did you write this story? Why was it important for you to write it at the time that you did?
Sure, yeah. So this is one of the first short stories that I wrote in like my adult life. And I had this thought about, like, I was not ironically, but I was listening to that song, What If God Was One of Us? And I was just stuck on that song for so long. And I had been really wrestling a lot with my relationship with God and religious trauma and all the things that go along with it. And I decided I wanted to tell a story of like what would happen if God came to Earth and actually had a conversation with a human being. And so that just got me thinking about like how would that happen and what would be the parameters of making that a plausible thing. And I thought, what would be a humorous way of doing that? And so I was like, what if God was on a dating app? And that was how we chose to do it. And that was pretty much what led me to this story. So it was really just about my thoughts and feelings towards God. I feel that the character Dana is all of us, but in essence, as most of my stories are me, or some variation of me wrestling with the things that I'm wrestling with in my life at the time.
I could definitely see what a personal story it was, and I do have some notes about that when we get into our thematic resonance portion of our discussion. So you kind of already jumped into giving the quick rundown, the elevator pitch of the story, but I'll give you a formal chance to give the outline elevator pitch.
Okay. I guess the best one is it's a conversation between what would happen if God had a date with a young lady and gives this woman the opportunity to save the earth. But to do so, before doing so, the young lady has some questions of her own.
That's a good elevator pitch.
Thank
That's
you.
probably the most elevator of all elevator pitches that we've had on this show. So
Thank
at least you've got that down pat.
Thank you.
All right.
Murder me.
Charles, we're not going to go that far. You are our boss after all. But no, really, this space is a space for conversation and brainstorming to happen. It's not just, as our editing style is at One Brilliant Arc, we aren't just giving you our objective opinion that's more professional than yours and you just have to take it. We are all artists and art is subjective. And as editors, we have our professional opinion, but we are just giving suggestions and kind of prompts and asking questions to help brainstorm and make the story even stronger than it is. So yeah, no scary stuff is happening here, even though as writers, it is super, super scary to put our stuff out there, like our raw beating heart in our written piece and asking someone to rip it apart. Again, we have so much respect for all of the writers who are brave enough to come on here and let a bunch of strange editors on the internet do that for their writing. And we are no different. We are practitioners, so we're going to show that our pieces can be ripped apart too, and we can also take what we dish out. So, with that being said, Charles, do you want to kick us off with what you saw in this piece that really was working?
So something I thought was really, really impressive as a whole is because I viewed this story too in an earlier form, so I was curious to see how it was going to be toughened up. And basically, the whole story in the telling, the whole construction of it, basically, it went to the gym for many, many months, and the writing improved very, very much so, both in a technical level, in a storytelling level, and it felt much, much more like a satisfying meal because something that I've seen with your writing before is very, very speedy, like the freaking Flash, very, very speedy, but filled with very tiny, but numerous grammatical, technical fixes that needed fixing. Here, though, again, it felt like the entire text of it really went to the gym and toughened up and muscled up and leaned up, which I thought was really, really impressive. And as a whole, it moved right into itself, told itself, and then left, which I thought was really, really, it's hard to do that. And I thought it did very, very well of, being a short story, which is, excuse me, which is really impressive. And don't know how much has changed in terms of the editing, but the tone of it felt also a little bit more like a punch. It felt more like a punch rather than kind of a poke at the reader, which was nice. So like with Dana, I felt that Dana had much more bite, much more of a ferocity, and um Olorun had more of an intrigue in the telling. So basically, I think the whole telling of it really improved in the last time that I've seen the text in terms of the technicalness as well as the emotionalness of it. It felt like it had much more um weight and relatability. Not that it wasn't there before, but again, it's like the same story went to the gym and got more muscular and stronger. So I think that was what was really working. So a lot of my a lot of my technical notes were very well, we'll get into it, but they were very if if beforehand the story was a boat that could sail, now this is a boat that has um heating and cooling and electricity and speed and a proper guidance system. And a lot of my notes had more to do with now let's do with the amenities, an open buffet and house cleaning and a jazz club, these kinds of little recommendations to make it the final ship. So
Mhm.
a very solid text.
Agreed. I think that interestingly, a lot of the story went to the gym is not only because it had time to marinate, but it's also a testament to Jared's priority of getting other eyes on it early on. So like I already went through line editing and development. Well, it was a whole like developmental editing, line editing, and copy editing, right? Yeah. And even still, like, it wasn't in its final form because we were still digging in on some things, but it got put a pin in and set to the side. But I think, Jared, your willingness and your priority of wanting to have other eyes on the story, and also letting stories marinate and then coming back to them. It shows in the way that the strength of it gets pushed right to the front, and it's not buried beneath anything that we need to now like dig into and trim away. So yes, that is a testament to that.
Thank you.
As much as I agree with all Charles said, I will also specify I always appreciate the metaphors and the unique descriptions that Jared finds. I thought that was all really working and really unique and strong in this piece. The contrast was also very alive and vivid. There were a lot of moments where you were contrasting, for example, Dana's beauty with her scratchy voice because she is a smoker and she has thyroid cancer. And that kind of contrast just makes your story come alive. It makes it more interesting. And it helps people pick up on those details more and gives it a texture. So as much as you have taught others how to use contrast to strengthen their own writing, you also use it really well here. Obviously, the entire premise of the piece is really, really interesting. It's unique and creative. And the emotional resonance of it is, again, we're going to get more into that after we go through these technical details for feedback, and we'll talk about the theme of the entire piece. But the emotional resonance is obviously there. It comes from a very deep place that I think a lot of people have been before, and it just gives a voice to what we've all felt and haven't necessarily been able to verbalize. And lastly, as far as a general overall feedback of what was working, I really liked that you didn't answer all of the questions that your story brought up. You kind of just offer a cathartic space for processing the pain that Dana is going through, and you start the conversation and then let the reader finish it all on their own. And that makes the story really personal to them when they can go and find their own answers to some of the questions that you raise, and then the space that you provide to start that processing. As far as a specific line that I really loved, that line, "No, dear, I'm not nearly brave enough," in answer to the question, "Are you crazy?" I very much appreciated the humor of that. I feel like it just brought so much personality to this piece and made the character of Oleron, who is a god, into a flesh and blood person with a personality. And that's just one example that revealed the subtle humor in such a heavy piece. You kind of break up that heaviness of such a hard topic with these bits of humor. So yeah, that's what I have. Any thoughts you'd like to add, Jared?
I think my writing style in general, um, it's when it comes to like the grammatical, technical things, I think a lot of the time when I first write something, I just write it. Like I don't think about where the period should go, or I just throw a comma in because I love commas. I don't know why. I just like commas, so I just throw them in everywhere. And I just kind of do that, and then I get somebody else's eyes on it as fast as possible. Um, because I don't know. I feel like I'm a lot more obsessed with figuring out if what I've written is worth a damn. Uh, and I think that because I think as all writers, we all get in that kind of, we can fall into the echo chamber of, this is fantastic, this is the most amazing thing that's ever existed, and I'm really proud of it. And then all of a sudden, other people read it, and it's like, oh no, this isn't as good as I thought it was. So I think kind of getting it out of the way as fast as possible is kind of why I try to get it in front of other people's eyes and more than one person, usually. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you guys' thoughts on the piece, and what it's become, and how it's gone to the gym, if you will. I really do appreciate that uh, that stance, because I remember working hard on this. Also for the marinating part, I think that's always important. I think as a writer too, to make sure that you kind of let it breathe. I think that's the one the one benefit, well, not the one of two benefits of creative ADHD, is my ability to jump from one project to another and then come back to something later on. Is it gives my stories a chance to decide what they want to be in my subconscious, so that way when I'm ready to do it, it's like, I want to take it in this direction, or I want to beef this up, or instead of obsessing about it until it's done.
Mhm.
So for all the other writers out there, I would say I recommend that too. Try to let it marinate and let it cook, because I think it turns out better when you do.
Let 'em cook. Sorry, I had to. I had to.
Valid, valid.
This is kind of going off of on a little side tangent, but I think
Mm,
it's really important to talk about. Um, but what you said about needing that reassurance early on that what you're writing and what you're pouring your soul into is worth a damn. I think that's something that we can all really relate to deep down
mm,
as writers. And that's one of the reasons why we created this podcast, because we want to give that space to writers, to give them that reassurance that what you are working on is worth it. It's worth the work to make it excellent and to share it with the world. But I think it's also important to know that if the story means something to you, like you were saying, Jared, this was such a personal piece that helped you process something that you were really struggling with. And I
mm,
think that if a story is important to you, that is the biggest indicator that it is going to be important to someone else in the world. And it's going to be worth the work of, again, putting in that effort to make it excellent and get it written and then share it with the world. As scary as it is, I think that it's so easy for us to get tunnel vision, um, and then just get overwhelmed by self-doubt, because again, our minds are an echo chamber when it comes to our stories. But as soon as you get other people to as soon as you start sharing it with other people, you have that proof. You can see that because it was important to you, it meant something to you, it is worth it, and it is important to someone else because someone else needs to hear the same thing that you needed to hear. You first write the story for yourself and then you write it for someone else.
mm.
So those are side tangent, but I think it's important to talk about when it comes to the process of writing, because it's not just the technical details, it's an emotional and spiritual process that's individual to each person.
Mm.
All right, well, moving on, now we get to dig in. As you can see in this document that we have shared on the screen, Charles and I kind of put in some of the technical notes that we would note if we were actually editing for a client of OBA's. So you can kind of see what it actually looks like to have your work edited. Some of these are small details and some of them are bigger notes, but we'll walk you through it and show you what it looks like to go through some edits that we might leave on your piece. So Charles, again, I will have you take it away, and we are going to now step into the section of what's not working and needs even more strengthening at the gym.
As a whole, there's a lot of little tiny technical very details. For example, what is Dana wearing? Is she overdressed as well? Um, a little bit of like sentence changing to avoid repetition, and of course the vague it. We all know I hate the vague it. You can thank one of my college mentors for that. Um, little details like that, which it's all here. I'm not going to get too much into that. Mainly, though, the three matters that I noticed. One is kind of a premise detail. The second is a speed a speed element, and the third is a presentation consideration. Um, so mainly the premise thing is I love the idea of gods on Tinder. That's funny. Um, I will note that the story itself is not necessarily about a date. Which might honestly maybe a title change might be the key there. Because the thing is, I like the conversation. I like how it jumps in. I like how it moves and flows, and it works. But I was thinking in terms of, if I was randomly reading the story and it's like, God is on a dating service, that's really funny. I did not feel that the story itself was about a date, if that makes sense. But that's just kind of me. That was just a note.
Quick thought to add to that,
Yeah.
because you're right. I see that now, even though that wasn't on my list of notes. Gods on Tinder as a title is a really great hook, but it's maybe not, the promise isn't fulfilled with the rest of the story. So you could either change the title, or you can add in a couple more details that continue to show, at least maybe to passersby, that they still see Dana and Oleron as a couple on a date. Because they start out in the cafe, and then they go to the sunset cruise, and then they go to Dana's house. So the setting still works. And now you just have to find little ways to mention the detail of they are still perceived as being on a date as this conversation is happening. Just different options, but I interrupted as you were.
So where the story goes, by the time we get to the boat, and I do agree with Jaylon, I'm glad you brought this up, is that I do like that a lot of the questions, a lot of the conversations, it's not really answered. And I think that's really smart for a few reasons. But I also think it's much more interesting because I think it becomes less lectury. And it becomes a little bit mysterious. I like that we never mention, who are these siblings? How does it make? How are they made up? Are they one? Are they not? Little details. I did mention that it reminds me of Sandman, and we all know how much I love the Sandman. But I will note, and you did a really good job of this. So this isn't a fix. This is a smooth out. Is I will note, Oloruan, speaking of the Sandman, really does come across as an a-hole. And that's fine. That's fine. First of all, I think it really works. There's actually one, let me find it. There's one line that I really thought was really emphasized that sense of him being like, oh, okay, he really is kind of an a-hole. This is where the story is going.
It was page 3, right underneath the "No, dear, I'm not nearly brave enough." It was, he couldn't help but be amused.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so something I will note is some of the suggestions I had, such as where he says who he is on page 2. So the line is, "Oh, I'm the god of the universe, master of all dominions." And I thought that you could say of the universe, of everything, of just basically saying that. And the reason I bring this up is that for my personal taste, these stories are a little tricky for me because I feel like they don't really come across as God or a God of some grand, horrifying, eldritch creator. They kind of just come across as a guy with magical powers, and it's not really my cup of tea. And I will say, my recommendation on that is, I felt that Olaroon was a little bit of an a-hole, which I think totally works. I think makes sense. I think is interesting. And I think for the most part, a lot of the characterization really does work to that end of making him feel more like a god, like an actual god, because he is so direct and so frank about a lot. And I guess direct and frank are a little bit the same thing, but again, forgive me. Very frank about what he is and what he wants. But I would recommend a few different changes of language. This doesn't mean it has to be all of a sudden high and fluting. It's not what I mean. For example, if you wanted him to be a little pretentious, but a little frightening, I recommended on that note, you could say of the universe of everything, or you could say of the universe I am that I am, which is from the book of Exodus. But the reason I bring that up is that it's a little cheeky, and it's just one of my little cheeky recommendations, but also it does illustrate that sense of like enormousness. So I would recommend that, or not recommend, but for me, I feel like what would really make this work is if for Lauren, yes, he's a little pretentious. Yes, he's very honest and frank. I think totally works. I would make him a little scary, a little
Mm.
frightening, because, and this is why if we go back to page 1, I recommend saying, instead of saying walking among mortals, I thought it could be interesting if you said walking among people. Because the whole, for me, when you use the, when people, not you exclusively, but when people say the word mortals, they're like, I am immortal, and the mortals of the mortal realm of the mortal, and immortality and infinite time, and it's just flamby-pamby elvish garbage. But if you say people, then all of a sudden, because everyone knows people are mortal, so that's covered. But if you say people, it's like he's not even human. It's not even there. And that's why I also recommended that instead of him kind of looking around with a candle, he just wave his hand and it's there. He doesn't care. That sense of that he's almost not even quite here. To this end, I did also make a note too, on page 4, I think it's at the bottom of 4, that he says, grant humanity a chance to save itself or exterminate them. I think what could be interesting is, again, if he's God, God doesn't necessarily really need to exterminate anyone. Exterminate is such a violent word. He could literally just blink and you're all gone. They're all gone. Hell, if you really wanted to, you could steal a horrifying bit from old Chris Claremont X-Men, where there's a gem that's a universe and it blinks out and there's just a little thin panel in black and it says blink, and the whole Marvel universe goes like, oh God, what was that? And it's basically for the 1 second the whole universe didn't exist for just a blink, that sort of thing. And again, I would recommend making Olorum a little bit more frightening, a little bit more inhuman in his powers, because I think emphasizing that she's not just amongst some sort of super powerful immortal guy, that she is among this thing, I think would really, really drive the point home. And I did make some recommendations on that about maybe cutting a few lines here, being there. I did want to have a question though, before I go bring it to my main part. Oh, by the way, I love the Eartha Kitt joke. I think that's adorable because I love Eartha Kitt. And the idea of a freaking Catholic went on a date with Eartha Kitt, it's just so perfect. It just cracks me up. Is I did have a note. I did have a question on page 7, where he says, humans shout to the rooftops about love and your right to exercise your free will, folding his fingers against his crossed legs. Is he a teacher or is he a parent? What's your interpretation of that?
When I was doing so, Oleron himself was meant to be a character in a bigger piece of work later. And so I've always seen him as more of a student. Who he is versus who, are you asking me who he is or who he thinks he is?
What do you think?
What I
What
think
did
he
you
is
write him with?
I wrote him with the idea that he's a student who thinks he's a teacher.
Okay. So to that end, if he's a student, so it's almost like basically he's like a grade A student. He's like a college student. He's like, oh, I'm working on my bachelor's degree, and I mean,
Yes.
I can tutor
That's the one.
elementary school kids. Of course, you can tutor elementary school kids if you're in college, but if you don't have a bachelor's degree, in the grand scheme of like academia, it's almost as if like you don't know nothing, son. So the reason I bring that up is that maybe then you can remember to just a little bit of the notes that I have here. Like you don't really need to rethink this hardcore. You just need to follow some of the notes just to smooth a bit of the dialogue, smooth a little bit of the elements. Of having Olorun be a college student who's working on his bachelor's degree in like chemistry, who can make an atomic bomb in an elementary school that he's tutoring. That kind of, I think that's how you can balance that sense of he doesn't know everything, but he's also scary as frack. The other note I had was I would recommend I'd recommend, again, this is on page 7 of where Dana says, "Why do you hate black folks more? Why do you hate black women?" Great question, but it felt like that was the first thing that she came up to, and my recommendation was it felt like too specific at first. So, which is why I recommended for Dana that maybe what you can do is have her start big, the big questions, and then she zeros down, and that's how you find out what is Dana really mad about. She's really
Mm.
mad at that. So basically, again, questions are really fine, but I think maybe let the roller
There it is.
coaster, let the audience get to the hill of the roller coaster before they just automatically drop, is my recommendation to that end. Again, there's some little details like that of about that with the dramatization. I will say I did recommend the one and this is impressive. The one thing I was like, this has to change. Is on page 8. My mother struggled for work 3 jobs. My father left to make sure my son doesn't want for nothing. Perfect. Her faith in you was relentless.
Here we go.
Perfect. Yet you deemed it necessary to strike her dead the day before she retired. Don't let her die like that the day before she retires. That's a Simpsons joke. That's a cartoony Looney Tunes joke. Still works. She can die. Don't do it the day before retirement. That is a very cartoony kind of, or now that occurs to me, you can dig into that actually. So actually, you have your second option. Your second option is you can actually have Dina say, it's like a stupid cartoon joke. She died before the day, she only had one more day till retirement. That's a joke. Actually, then I say it, I think that would be perfect because
But it's not funny when it's not in
Yeah.
the cartoons.
it's not funny because it's not a cartoon. And when stuff like that happens, it's horrifying because it feels like a joke. It feels like someone is playing a joke.
I thought that I have about the okay, so the comment about why don't you like black folks, more specifically, why don't you like black women? Um, when I wrote that line, it was an important conversation, an important question that I felt needed answering. One, because I recognize that African American women are probably the least protected and most persecuted, but I also realized that like Oleron understood that was that was the shield. That's not really what she cared about to begin with. Like while she may care about it, it's not what she really wants to know. And so when she goes further into her other issues, when she starts to talk about what happened with her mother, it's almost like it's that when we talk about like liberals or individuals who get really really outraged by specific topics, and then you start and it's like they get offended or upset about like larger, bigger themes that are like, oh, why is this happening? Or why don't we have healthcare here? But it's like, what are you really mad about? And it felt like the response, like I wanted Dana to give him the expected question, the thing that seems the most obvious, the thing that seems like, asking about why God isn't protecting black women seems like a big question, but an obvious question. And it's not really what, as an individual, a person really wants to know when we start to ask the question of how does this impact me as a human being? How does this, or not even as a human being, but as an individual? And so I wanted to start with the big question and then go down to more what might seem like lesser things, because I felt I was also trying to aim for how would a human being speak to God, or how would I speak to God if he came to me. And I know that in my outrage and my frustration, I would definitely throw up all the big problems like why do we have world hunger, or why do we have whatever. But really I want to know, why did my dad do what he did to me? Why did you let him do what he did to me? That's what I really want to know, and that's what I was kind of going for with Dana, if that makes sense.
That's a really good point, that the big questions that feel like the heaviest aren't always the sharpest, because the sharpest questions that we really want to know are the ones that are more personal.
Yeah. So to that end, you could literally clarify that with a follow-up sentence. Basically, in Olaroon's head, he goes like, very interesting. I see there's something in there, kind of like in his head, a sentence like that.
Gotcha.
Because again, you don't have to tell the audience everything. You just need to kind of guide them, like a mouse and cheese. just guide them forward. Last point though, really, is maybe this was just me, but I felt that the thing where he gives her a chance and then the two sat in silence and then she's dead and it's 2065. But by the way, I love the 2065 element. And then it kind of like he wanders off like kind of like it's all wondrous. I felt that was really fast. And the thing is I'm trying to figure this out because it was like 12 pages. So tight. It's so compact. I don't want to touch it. But I did feel that was a little fast. It was just really, really quick. So the thing is, I think what I would
There was a
recommend.
reason for that, by the way, but I'll let you finish.
Okay. I was going to say, I think what you could do is maybe just add a paragraph or two and make it very tight sentences that just dig into a feeling vibe. Because I think the thing is that it wasn't what happened. I think it was almost like it was so quick they didn't have time to digest it. It's almost like I drank from a cup and it was just gone. And it was like, what did I drink? And it was like, oh, that was orange root beer. And I'm like, that was so fast. I didn't even know it was orange root beer. I like orange root beer. So maybe something like that, something to just emphasize the weight of the moment. And to this end, while we're on the subject of Oleron is a student. I mean, I love the rainbow bracelet. I meant to mention that. I really liked that. I don't know why, but it was just really popped in my imagination. But maybe he smiled. He smiled for her willingness to sacrifice for the deaf. Maybe it's not as final in his head. Like maybe because he's a student and he is still learning, maybe this is it's like the first time you ever read a book that's like a grown-up book and you're like, this is amazing. But then years later you read more grown-up books and you're like, oh, that was only one piece of the tapestry of adult literature. So maybe it can be a little less like, you did good, kid, and it's more like this fills me with feelings and I don't know what does this mean? Kind of more of that curiosity element. And again, all of this works. It just felt for me like a little fast. It was almost like I couldn't quite taste it a little bit. But other than that though, like I said, honestly, these are very, very quick fixes. A lot of little technical things that I would just smooth over real quick. And honestly, in terms of like percentage grade of work to be done, this might be the most tightest text that I've seen. So to that end, it's like if I had to have this stuff would probably take a weekend, and then you're done. So.
My question, or perhaps there's a suggestion for this, but when you talk about the ending, specifically how fast it goes, so for me, as I've sat with this piece long after me and Jaylon worked on it and I put it away in the folder and I've come back on it, that has been something that I've always wanted to hammer out more. But I had a thought about it that I'll share with you guys. And if you think it's valid, maybe we can maybe there's recommendations on how to make it stronger. But as you can see here where it says the two sat in silence and then that's it. And then the next thing we know, she's dead and it's years later. For me, I love the idea that when we switch back to a more Oleron's point of view, that go from the two sat in silence to now we're at the funeral, I wanted it to feel final and quick because life, that period of time passed so fast for Oleron that it was almost as if nothing happened in between. And I really wanted it to be like when we pick back up with him, it's almost like, yeah, she's dead, but she lived a whole life. She did all these other things, and there's, we could sit in the emotions or we could sit in the feelings of like what we're talking about. But what if it was more of this quick finality to life, and how quickly life can be over. And I really wanted that to be done from that sentence to the next. And I felt like it worked, but I mean, if there's a better way to do it, I would love recommendations on that.
I have a quick thought. Bring back the children. Because I'm thinking, if you're wanting to show about time, it could be interesting that it's like, when you're like literally last night, I was trying to sleep. I was listening to my audiobook and I was reading and I was like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, I kind of listened to the audiobook again and it was like, the whole scene had changed. I was like, what were they? Oh, shoot, I dozed off and I turned off the audiobook, went to sleep. So it could be interesting if we've seen Dana's perspective on the children, which Jaylon has notes about, so I'll let her say that. What if the two sat in silence and Olaroon is waiting for an answer? He's looking at the kids, and we see what he thinks about those two kids on the boat and what he thinks of what Dana might do to them and their future. And then you cut to the end of basically, I wonder if like he's dreaming of something, basically. It's almost like you're drifting off to a dream or waking up. And maybe that could be kind of like the transition. Like maybe really it's just a technical issue of the two sat in silence. Da-dum. Maybe it's the two sat in silence and we think and we dream. And then the final section. That's the instant idea I have off the top of my head.
Really interesting, because when you said bring back the children, I was thinking bring back the children as like have them be grown-ups in the final section. Because yeah, that would work technically with she chose to save humanity. I think the beat that we're missing has to do with it's going to come out earlier, not necessarily in this ending paragraph or in this ending scene where they're sitting in her home. But I think that it's just an extra beat of, like Charles said, name the feeling that she has about humanity and about the beauty and the joy of the broken, even like in the midst of the brokenness that makes her want to save it. I think Charles wrote in one of his notes, like just giving a little bit more acknowledgement to exactly what it is that helps that decision. Not just like that that's the right decision to make, but again, like you said, as humans, we're all just really interested in ourselves and our own personal stories. So what is it about, beyond just like imagining these kids' future that she sees on the boat, what is it that makes her think that adult humanity is worth saving? Is there another moment that can be named where the feelings that she has that make it worth it, despite all of the sadness and brokenness and pain? I think it's just like taking a moment to name that. And like Charles said, it can be just one paragraph or even a single sentence. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
I think that makes sense. I think it could be incredibly useful. So I like it. Thank you, both of you.
I really like how I think the audience is getting a really good taste of how our editing sessions usually work, because as editors, it's always just our job first to understand what the author was really trying to say. So when Charles or I give a suggestion and then Jared's like, no, there's a reason for that, let me explain the reason, and then it completely changes our suggestion, that's the conversation that we're talking about that differentiates editors who don't really care about centering your authentic voice versus editors who are your story partners like we want to be. So yeah, anyway. All right. So my turn. Real quick, I'm going to jump back. I forgot another quick thing that was working.
Okay.
Page 4. Yeah. She suddenly felt as if she was being scolded by the father she had never had. That is such a great detail that perfectly demonstrates what it is to give backstory detail in the present actions, that you're not info dumping. So I just wanted to highlight that as like, this is how you do it. There you go.
I also did that, and I also did like how it's like the father she never had. Okay, great. And then she brings it up again. You're like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that too. Okay, so starting from page 1, I had a few just general notes, and then I tried to only have a few of the like detailed technical notes. My first one is in this first paragraph, and a lot of these have to do with my general notes being, I already said your contrast and your details were great. And so most of what's not working is just pushing even harder at what you've already proven you're good at to make it purposeful and not just seem like a happy coincidence that it was there. So for this in particular, talking about Gus's cafe wouldn't have been his top choice for a first date. I think that it would be really interesting because the first thing that jumped out to me was the dimly lit dining hall. And that's the first and only description we get of the atmosphere of Gus's cafe. And in my mind, that brings like a fine dining experience to mind. And I wonder if you can add just another detail that kind of makes it obvious why it wasn't Oleron's first choice for a first date. Maybe something about it's dingy or it's loud or there's a certain smell coming from the floor or the plastic coated menus are sticky. Like, those kinds of things are details that don't necessarily ruin an experience at a place for me, but it kind of gives that hint to now someone can get behind, like, it's all these little things that pile up and it makes the entire experience not a top choice. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's my first one. And then the next note at the bottom of page 1, the waiter showed up at the table. Oleron imagined him as an actor coming onto stage, purely on cue, prepared to perform. And this is, again, another example of a great metaphor that you have. But what is it about this metaphor that makes it make sense for his character? Is it that, even though he is a immortal being, his one experience of dating Eartha Kitt made him reference everything to acting and theater? Or is it that there's something else that he has an experience in? Maybe he views all of humanity as puppets, basically actors. And that this can be like a little glimpse into how he views humanity, like Charles was saying, of he's this scary being because he doesn't view humanity on the pedestal that we view humanity on.
That was my thinking when I did that too, was that he's in Oleron's eyes, everyone is all the people, to use Charles's expression instead of mortals, but all the people are just characters to him.
Mm-hmm.
They're like toys that you pull out of a toy chest and use when you're one, and then you put them away. I mean, and I felt like it had to be that way, and I wanted him to, in a way, see humans in that way, because I feel like only a being that sees humans that way can casually state that they're going to wipe humanity off of the face of the earth, as if, like, he's ordering something off a menu. To me, there had to be a level of detachment, I think, where humans are more a source of entertainment than they are people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in that case, this doesn't necessarily fall under something that needs work. It's more something that I just wanted to point out of, all of your metaphors and all of your contrast it's there for a reason. Every single detail is hinting at something deeper. So push it to the front, make it purposeful, and have those reasons behind what you're saying. And then just make sure you center that, push it to the front. Because it's going to make it come across even stronger.
Okay.
Okay, a general note. And I know this was something that we were working on when we were revising the first draft, and this was one of the things where, like, there was just something that I felt was wrong with it, but I couldn't necessarily pinpoint what it was, and I think I may have pinpointed it. So stick with me here. But I know that at first this was going to be a story just from Oleron's perspective. And then we changed it to incorporate Dana's point of view as well, which I really love. But because it's written in third person, and because sometimes the point of view switches are very vague, it doesn't always read clearly. Sometimes you can miss the point of view switches if you're just casually reading it. You have to really study it to see, like, oh no, like I can track this is where we jump from Oleron's head to Dana's head. So I couldn't necessarily figure out, particularly it was the first shift to Dana's point of view on page 3 at the first section break here. Felt like that point of view shift had to be, it needs to be signaled more immediately, because it kind of like, it flows into itself as you continue reading down, but in those first few paragraphs especially, it doesn't necessarily feel any different from how that first section was narrated. So it makes a reader wonder, like, why is that section break there? And I think what it is, because what makes third person omniscient different from third person limited is how personal it is. So some of these details, like Dana hugged her purse as if it was the only thing in the world that could keep her safe. That as if is a cue that Oleron is seeing that, and he's giving his best guess as to what she's doing and narrating what it looks like to him that he's doing. But if you can just change that to be a little bit more personal. So, for example, and this is just like me spitballing, it doesn't have to be this. I think you could come up with something much better. But something like Dana hugged her purse thinking it would somehow protect her from this man's insanity. Making it feel more personal, like only she knows what she's doing, and she's having this thought. It's not something that a different perspective is interpreting about an action that she's having. So I think that to solve this issue of the point of view shifts that are too subtle, maybe just in these few paragraphs right after this shift, give some very personal details that a reader would know only Dana would know about herself. And Oleron wouldn't be able to narrate because it's in Dana's head. Again, oddly, even though Oleron is an omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful being. So, anyway, that was my brainstorm, and I felt like I had a light bulb moment, but let me know what you think about that.
As far as the as-if point that you made, because I think when I was writing it, my thought was, one, like we said, originally it was supposed to be all from Oleron's perspective, so it was kind of going back into it and tweaking it so that we, when it did make those random POV shifts, it made more sense. But even with the as if, it was almost like I'm trying to be the narrator in the situation and kind of creating a metaphor here or a metaphor here or some sort of comparison that would make it make sense. But I do like the idea of adding it so that it's more Dana as opposed to either Oleron or some omniscient narrator that's kind of just dropping in for a second to try to give you some dazzling metaphors. And I feel like I might have done that differently now today as opposed to when I did this. But yeah, I definitely I see your point. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right. Cool. I just needed to know if my light bulb moment was
No, I think
off the tracks or on the tracks.
I think you know that.
Okay. Next, page 8 talked about Dana explodes at Oleron. Yeah, right here.
Such foul language.
Such foul language to say to a god's face. No, but that's the point. And my thought was, with how amped up Dana is. I wonder if this section where she softens, if that happens a little bit too quickly from how emotionally charged she is. So maybe it's more of a moment where she couldn't help her curiosity that caused her to soften. The curiosity was what led to the softening, not, again, someone, we all know that as women, when a guy tells you to calm down, that is the last thing that you're about to do.
Sure.
So I wonder if this is more one of those moments where we want to highlight what it was that got her from screaming profanity in a god's face to now being soft and leaning against a railing on a sunset cruise with him. And I have a funny feeling, knowing Dana's character, that it wouldn't be Oleron saying basically calm down.
Right.
So just one little note that, again, it just taking an extra second to specify what it was that was going on in her head. And then moving on to the kids, as Charles mentioned, and that is on page 9, right here. So, as it was written, this is the one moment that kind of gives a check mark on the side of Dana's choice to save humanity. Everything else seems like it's giving a check mark on the side of don't save humanity, start over. It's too messed up to save. So this is gonna have to be like a really key moment. And as Charles said here, imagining the futures that these kids have to be purely from a socioeconomic viewpoint kind of zaps the joy out of it, and you're trying to highlight the joy. So my thought to satisfy Charles's feedback here is make it more personal. Have her imagine them as the people that they will love, the little moments that they have, maybe the children that they will raise, or just little pieces of joy in life that don't have to do with a career, that make you really love life. Maybe digging into the personal side of that is where the actual power is. Yeah. Last note here. Oh no, second to last. I'm almost done. And this kind of is like a repeat of the note that I had for Dana. But for Oleron now, in the middle of page 10, Oleron took an uneven step before resuming his steely reserve. And this section kind of read a little bit to me like he's having a childish argument and he just got kicked and now he's trying to get back up again, but he does so with a very weak and childish argument. And I wonder if his pride, because as Charles said, and as you said, he's a student, but he thinks he knows it all. But he's also very prideful because as an all-knowing, all-powerful, immortal being, you kind of can't help but have a lot of pride. So I wonder how much his pride would let him break, especially when he knows that he can take that low blow at Dana. And he's been saving this one where he confronts her and says, "You're dying. You have cancer." And I wonder if his pride would let him break before he gives that zinger, or maybe a little bit after. Or maybe it just wouldn't break so obviously. Maybe his pride took a hit because Dana made a good point with, and you're bored now, so you're closing the book and starting a new one. How overwhelmingly uncreative. But maybe he doesn't show how much that kicks him.
I wonder, I like this. My question though is, so when I remember when I wrote this, then my thought for Oleron is that, again, this is one of those things where Oleron is supposed to be a character from a bigger piece of work, and what you learn about him in the bigger piece of work, that he has a mother, and although he is all knowing and although he has all of that, he is, so when he says I'm all knowing, the master of all, it's more of, that's a matter of pride than it is a matter of fact.
Okay.
And so it's like, it's one of those things where they say you don't know what you don't know. as a god, that's him. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. And so for him, he's learning human beings. He still has his pride. He still has ego. He still takes offense to things. He still gets his feelings hurt because he's a younger god. And so while he presents to Dana, he's obviously, millennia older than, he's still in the grand, relatively compared to other gods, he's not as old. And so when he makes that jab, it's almost meant to be childish because Oleron, as you would learn in a bigger piece of work, Oleron has a lot more growing up to do. And so in that moment, I wanted to kind of show a glimpse of it. Again, this story was also meant to be kind of a introduction to a character that other people would be able to see later on. And I wanted it to be more of a hint of like, oh, he can be a little juvenile sometimes. And then later on sort of explain why he's more juvenile and how he interacts with things. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yes. So I was actually reading this exactly how it was supposed to be written, and that means ignore that point. Okay. So lastly, last page here, you said he walked through the tombstones, his eyes scanning the trees and watching the squirrels dart above, unaware of the world devoid of life beneath them. And I wonder if, assuming that some time has gone by, even though he's kind of like, as you said, like it feels like a moment for him. He's grown up maybe a teeny tiny bit. So my thought is maybe since he's familiar with there is no end to the energy or the spirit of life, a graveyard is not entirely dead. It's just life in the process of being recycled. I wonder if he would specifically, from his perspective, have a comment to make about that instead of a world devoid of life beneath them. Maybe he would say a world heavy with debt, yet not devoid of life beneath them. But again, that's more of a question posed to you of how does Oleron see human death?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously seen death prior. And I think like you said, he's a little bit older than he was then. But I mean, I think it's very small, a very small level of growth. I mean, I guess for a god, I would imagine that somebody who's died, maybe 50, 60 years later from the original time that he had met with her is like, I don't know, a month after your birthday. For him. So it's like, yeah, I've been whatever age I am now for about a month, and now I know. So I think that there's still a level of a naivete to him, and I think that he still has this level of pride, and still sees human beings as kind of entertainment. I think he's moved by Dana's sacrifice, but not so much that he's like, all human beings are great. When humans die, they just die. Like it is what it is. What he's detached from it. So I think for him, the idea that there is no life beneath the earth is more of the level of detachment I think that he has from human beings. But I do like the idea of him because I mean I also think that if you are thousands of years old and you might have even been here at the beginning of the creation of Earth, you are aware that the dead feed the soil and that creates life. So I think that describing that in a more technical term, maybe he sees it more in a mechanical way as opposed to like, oh, the beauty of life. It's not poetic for him. It's more of maybe he describes it as like an engineer might describe how something works as opposed to what's beautiful. It's less Mufasa, more, I don't know, some famous engineer. So that's what I would think, maybe.
That makes
like
sense.
a beautiful car, like in freaking F1 engine,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, more less Mufasa, more mechanic type description, I think would be kind of how he might say that.
So with that in mind, I would say just make it consistent between the first paragraph of this section and the last two paragraphs. Whether he has become a character that is still extremely detached or whether he has become a sentimental character. Because when we talk about at the end here, he's smiling and he's being reflective in more of a poetic way about humanity,
Mm,
being moved by
mm,
Dana's selflessness. I think that he can be moved by Dana's selflessness, but just keep the tone the same no matter what
Right.
choice you go with, to whether you rewrite this particular sentence or not. Just keep it consistent with the
mm.
tone that he carries on through as the story ends out. So that his character is solidified for people to build interest in and then read more about him in other stories yet to come. I think that wraps up all of our notes. Lastly, we'll touch on thematic resonance. What is it? What's the story underneath the story that, to steal Jared's words, that makes this worth a damn? What is it that is really the purpose behind the telling of this story? So, as always, Charles and I, as the readers, will give our perspective, and then, Jared, you can wrap us up with what you intended as its author and see if it aligns.
Well, you know what's really funny is for me personally, personal taste, I'm not particularly fanciful for these kinds of stories where it's like, huh, let's talk about why the universe is the way it is in a conversation, much like, what is that one movie? I can't remember, with Max von Sydow, the knight who plays chess with death. I cannot remember this movie to save my life, the title of the movie. It's not my cup of tea for a few very personal reasons. But the thing that sticks with me in terms of thematic resonance of the story is very quickly Dana makes very specific, very direct, very for the throat questions and comments. And Alarun delivers his shtick. And Dana doesn't, she's not really moved by it. But instead of it being cynical in that kind of like, the world is awful and blah, it was just more of, I don't know, like it felt more confident, felt more uplifting in a weird way because Dana wasn't accepting of this kind of garbage, but it wasn't despairing garbage either. It was just like, this is the way things are. It's like, oh, okay, this is the way things are. And you know what? I don't like it. I don't have to accept that this is the only way that it is. After reading the story, that's the part that's really stuck in my brain of Dana not being Orlarun of, oh, you'll understand one day. It wasn't like that. It was just, here's the way things are. And instead of kind of going like a take it or leave it sort of a thing, the tone of the story, the thematic part of it felt like, yeah, that's not very good. And it's okay to not be cheery with that and to confront it in a less cynical or bitter way. That's the main kick that I took out of it. And or maybe not the kick that I took out of it so much as, and this is just as important, been sitting in my head and sitting in my head after finishing the story. So
I think it's really important when you have a story like this that it isn't preachy. It's very much just, it gives weight, because both Dana and Olern make good points. They make good arguments, but space is given to the heaviness of humanity is broken. It really, really stinks to be a human. And the fact that Dana's character doesn't change in the sense that she doesn't learn to dismiss the parts of humanity that really, really stink and the pain of it. But she does learn that it's worth holding on to the little moments that are worth it. And I think that that's ultimately what both Dana and Oleron have to learn, is that it's not the overall thing of it. It's acknowledging the stinky parts of it, but then being able to also hold in the other hand of the overwhelming bad with, there's these little bits of good that make it worth it. So some themes that I pulled out of it was everyone's story matters, no matter what pain you've walked through. The fact that you have left an imprint on this earth by living your story, that matters. That had a purpose. Even pain has a purpose. And another thought that this story brought up for me was humanity's goodness is in their moments of selflessness. And also another thought was fate doesn't always control your choices. Maybe, and again, this is more like a personal brainstorm that the starting of this conversation that this story gave to me. But just the fact that the gods had decided that humanity was too broken to be worth saving didn't mean that Oleron still didn't have the choice to take a different path. Just because Dana was dying, she had suffered so significantly and was suffering so significantly didn't mean that her story was over. Didn't mean that she still had the free will to make a choice that changed what fate had written for her. And that was something that kind of stuck out to me, but again, that might just be personally how this story spoke to me and what my brain came up with as an ending to the conversation that you started. But Jared, I will let you close us out with your thoughts of the purpose behind this story.
You both got a lot of what I was going for, correct? For me, when I wrote this story, it was really about the idea of the reason why Dana has so much horrible things that have happened to her in her life was I really wanted it wasn't just about me. It was about every single person that I've ever met and so many people that I've connected with, and they all have sad stories, sad origin stories, and it gets really, really hard to make sense of it. And what if you had the opportunity to sit down with the person who you deem is responsible for all of those things? And the reason why I didn't want any of those questions to be answered was because there are no answers. That at the end of the day, things happen because they happen. But I wanted it to be clear that despite all the horrible things that happen to you, despite how everything can be piled up against you, you still have a choice at how it all ends for you. And by how it ends, you may not be able to choose how you check out of this planet, but you sure can choose how you choose to live, and you can choose the things that you choose to do on a daily basis. And Dana's decision to make the sacrifice she made was that in spite of all of the things that have happened to her, she was still making the choice to do something. It was her choice. It wasn't the gods. It wasn't anyone else. She made that decision. And I wanted every person who read this story to remember that no matter what life has dealt you, that at the end of the day, it is your choice how you choose to go on in this planet. And although we may not know what happens next, and we may not know why it all happens, and we don't have the answers to life's meaning, if there is any meaning at all, we do still have the ability to choose. And both characters had choices in front of them. And both characters, like you said, Jaylon, ultimately didn't just settle for destiny. This is what fate says. Fate says the world's going to end and everybody's going to die. That's what it is. So it's got to be. But Oleron gave an opportunity. She made a sacrifice. So yeah, my ultimate is less. I think it was less about themes and more about thematic statement would be that at the end of the day, no matter how your life plays out, the choice is yours as to how you choose to live. And no gods or supernatural forces can ever change that. And that was pretty much the point of this whole thing was for me.
Well, as it should be, the author said it way more beautifully than the editors could have. I really love that. That is exactly why this story stood out to me as one of the first pieces that I ever got to read of your written work, and exactly what sets you apart as such a good storyteller.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, that was awesome. It was very, very, very interesting being in this side of the seat.
It's my turn next. I'm the only one who hasn't
Yes,
had their
your turn
writing
next.
ripped apart.
So yeah, it was definitely different, and I have even more respect for the people who come on the show and do it, because it's not easy. It's really not. I don't know if other writers feel like I do about the whole, you're always questioning, am I good at writing? Am I a good writer? Do I have what it takes to do this? I was just telling someone earlier today about how writers have this whole thing where we mystify writing. We make it this magical thing that only some of us can do and only some of us do. But really, writing is just craft. It's just doing again and again and again until it's good. And so and I say that for other writers, I say that for you guys, but I also say it for myself as a constant reminder, because that's the number one, whenever I sit down to write anything, that is the number one question that's in my brain. Am I good enough to be doing this? This sucks. I'm terrible. And I think doing this makes it incredibly scary because you're like, oh, this is where people are going to tell you. You don't have a kid. But to get the feedback that I've gotten and to know that really all of this is just keep working at it and it'll eventually be something beautiful. If you think about it, I think more writers should, and I'm going to do it for mine. I'm going to do it for my book. But I think all writers should release at least a chapter or two of their first draft because I think that it really does demystify the art of writing. That it's like when you write something and you're like, this is terrible, this is trash. And then you see your favorite author has released their first draft and you're like, ew. And it's like, well, if they could do that, then I can do it too. I can get it to where, because really it's just editors. It's really good editors and really great conversations. If you have good editors, great conversations, and that's what leads to polished, great work. So I say all that to say that if right now and you're listening to this and you're struggling with your story and you're thinking, this is the worst garbage that has ever been garbaged, please know that you need a good editor. And it'll be as beautiful as it absolutely needs to be. And if you need a good editor, why not Oba? So
We're here
sorry,
for
that
you.
was a shameless plug, and I have zero regrets. But anyway.
No, because we don't want you to experience the bad editors. We want to make
Absolutely.
editing a positive experience for you and bring out the value that's already there in your first draft. You just need someone to point it out for you and get you out of your own head that will only feed you self-doubt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I need that more than anything in the world. And if I exist, that means other people like me exist. So please know that. But anyway, thank you guys for doing this with me. This was fun and scary. And I had a heart attack and I'm alive again. And this was wonderful. So we're going to tinker with this new format and see if we can get as many more people on here because I think it'll be more beneficial to do it this way. And we'll do that. So
Comment below if you like it when you can see the editing notes on the screen as opposed to us just saying them.
for sure. Comment below.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, guys. Well, thank you again, and we will see you next time.